hold. Most banks will allow you to review those and either reject or clear them. But nowadays, check fraud is all over the place with computers and with printers. It is very, very, very easy for people to fraudulently create checks. All they need is your routing number and your bank account, and it happens all the time. This is a great tool to use to help prevent some of that. Normally when you find fraud, the bank's going to refund you, but what if it's a huge amount of money? You don't want to sit there and let the bank hold on to your funds or block your funds. Much better to catch these people right up front and to put that fraud preventative in place. So let me take a peek here at SafePay. To get into SafePay, we're going to go up to Microsoft Dynamics GP. We're going to go to Tools. We're going to go to Routines. We're going to come down here to Financial, and we're going to go to SafePay. All of our SafePay steps are right here. If I go, our setup becomes at the configurator. So if I click on the configurator, I've actually pre-set up a format here for Chase Manhattan. This is something that most likely NextTech would do for you because there's some XML code that needs to go in, but it's really quite straightforward. So what I've done is I've basically created an output file, and based on Chase Manhattan's specifications, I've added different fields and fillers that are going to be used to create the file that you're going to upload to your bank. This does not take long. Each bank is a little bit different, so we would work with your bank to obtain the file format that they need and make sure that it's configured properly, and we go through a whole testing process with them to make sure that everything works. Each bank is a little bit different. But if we take a peek down here, down in this area, we can see what that string is going to look like with the check payee. And this is based on Chase's specs. This particular bank just has detail lines. Some banks may need headers, some may need footers, but this our program here, the SafePay Configurator, is able to handle all of that. So it's really a nice tool. We can also import and export, so if you create one file and you want to use it with other banks or use it in another GP company, it's easy to configure it once and then import and export to your other companies. So once we've got this file set up, and it's a few hours, it doesn't take too long. The testing process is usually a bit of back and forth, and we can tweak it if the bank says any changes are needed. So once that's all set up, what we're going to do as a user is we're going to go back up here to Financial, and we are going to go back to SafePay, and we're going to go down here to Transactions Upload. Okay? So I'm going to pull, and we can have multiple banks. So if you bank with Bank of America, if you bank with Wells Fargo, all of these banks can be configured to use this process. So if we come up here, I've got my bank selected here. We're going to select our bank. And what we're going to do is we're going to select a cutoff date. What it's going to do is pull all the checks that have written through this date, through the last upload date. My last upload date was 2/28/17. We're in the Fabricam company for GP. My upload cutoff date is 4/12. So what I would expect when I click the load reload is all my checks written through 4/12 are going to populate up here. So when I click load, reload, here they all are. So we can go ahead now and create our file. It's very straightforward. You can see it's pulled our checkbook ID, our transaction check number, transaction date, and what will happen now is all this info is going to be passed to the bank in the format they need to see to help you process your checks properly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click my upload button right here, and it's going to ask me to proceed. I'm going to go ahead and proceed, and we can see we have created a file to this drive. We actually, as part of the configuration, we select the folder that the file is going to go to. And let me see if I can even take a peek here at this file. And here we are here in the first bank. So my file is going to be down in here. And what will happen is there's two different ways to handle this. One is that you actually go through basically a manual upload. You will go up to your bank website, and there will be a link, and then you'll browse out to that drive that you've saved the file to, and then you'll go ahead and you will upload the file to the bank. The other thing that we can do is sometimes the bank has the ability to set up an FTP type of a connection where we can automate that for you. So the folder that you put it to is a secure folder, and it goes onto a schedule, and we schedule it at midnight or whatever time you want it to do. It'll automatically go out, pull that file, upload it automatically to the bank, and you don't even need to think twice about it. So there's a couple different ways to manage it. The automated upload, usually there's a little bit more of a fee from the bank, so it's really up to you. If you're dealing with lots and lots and lots of check runs, the automated way is usually the way to go. So once we've done all that, it just becomes as part of your check run, part of your processes, whether you're running checks every day, 3 times a day, however often you need to use it. These checks now are basically there for the bank. They know what you've written, and they know how to clear them. So just to take a little bit out, it's very, they want you to put a confirmation number in. When the upload happens, there'll be some type of a confirmation. So I'm just going to go ahead and say I was successful. And I'm going to get a report here that gives me my file. Here it is in a nice format saying, this is what we told the bank we wrote checks for, or we want you to pay. So you can copy that, you can save it with your check run, you can save it with your subs, but it is your confirmation that the file was successfully created. So just a little bit more in here. If we come down back to our tools and routines, and we go back to SafePay, we can take a look here at our history. So if I pull my bank, I can see here what's actually happened. We can go back here and drill into these transactions, and I can even re-upload. If the file fails for some reason, if the bank says that file wasn't successful, the transmission was successful, I can actually recreate this file to resubmit it to the bank. So it's a very, very simple tool. As you can see, there's not a lot to it, but it really allows you to have some control over what the bank is going to pay. So that's a little bit on SafePay. What we're going to pop over to now is, I think, one of the most exciting things, which is the EFT. And GP EFT allows us, instead of writing checks, some people are always going to want checks that just, the small mom and pop places, but a lot of bigger companies now, we all know it's an electronic world. We use our debit cards, we have direct deposit for payroll, and it's kind of been last legs where the business world has really held onto check writing, and that's going away now. And if you think about the cost to write a check, you've got somebody you've got to buy check stop. Either it's pre-printed, which is expensive, or it's MICR printed. MICR ink is expensive. Then you have to have somebody run the checks. You have to have either somebody sign them, or you have some kind of automated signing process. Then you have to have an approver. Then you have to stuff those checks. Then you have to put postage on it. So if you really do a cost analysis, and all this takes time, so you're paying people to do all of this. And I did an analysis. This is a few years back. I'm sure it's more expensive now. And the company I was with, we ended up figuring out it costs like $2.50 per check using the old process. And oh boy, if you think about that, that's a lot. Thousands of checks every year. It's really kind of almost throwing money out the door, and it's taking up people's time doing really menial tasks, stuffing envelopes, when they could be, running reports and analyzing and doing the things that's more cost effective for them to do. So now we have EFT. We have the ability to electronically pay people as well as electronically receive money from your customers. There's a bit of cost associated, maybe, I don't know nowadays exactly how much it is, but 10, 15 cents a transaction, maybe a small monthly fee. Once you are over a certain volume of checks, if you're writing 5 checks a month, well, maybe that won't be cost effective, but a lot of our customers are writing thousands, and they very, very, very quickly reap the cost benefit from this process. And it doesn't take, it's maybe, depending on how many banks, maybe a 20 to 30 hour implementation. So we're not talking, weeks and months. We work closely with your bank, just like we do with SafePay, to make sure that the file format is correct. and we go through a process, we go through a testing process. If you've got one bank and it's a bank we've worked with, we can maybe get you implemented within 15 hours, and you're ready to go. And the cost savings are immediate. Usually you recoup them within a few weeks, even after the implementation, because of what you're saving. So let's go ahead now and let's dive into that, and let's take a look at what GP EFT can do for us. We're going to start here very simply with our checkbook. We all have our GP checkbooks. So we're going to pop in here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select Uptown Trust. It's my Fabricam. And once we enable the EFT tool, we see a new button here. It's called EFT Bank. Some of us have direct deposit already. Very similar. But we're going to go ahead. I'm going to make sure my bank account number is here. I'm going to make sure I have a bank ID with my routing code here. And then I'm going to go ahead and click EFT. Again, we put our transit routing number in. By the way, EFT, it also works for wires, foreign wires. So if you're doing foreign business, we can work with your banks as well to help you transmit wires. I did a lot of work with Bermuda banks, and they were wiring all over the world. So we have some experts at NextTech that can even help you work with foreign. And as you can see here, this is set up with different formats all over the world. So it's really, really super. And again, I'm going to select United States because that's where we are domestically, but just wanted to point out if you'd like us to help you get going with foreign wires and whatnot, we can help you with that as well. So we're going to put our transit routing code. We're going to put our bank account number in, tax registration number. Each bank is different. Some banks want to see that tax ID, some don't. So some of these fields you'll populate depending on what your bank needs to see from the file. We're going to put our bank company name in, our company ID number. Most banks have a unique identifier that goes along with your upload file in addition to your bank account number. So if they require that, they will provide that. And then we have just some general information. This is all file information that the bank provides to NextTech, so we know exactly how the headers need to look. And again, we're going to put in country codes and ISO currency code because perhaps we're not paying in U.S. Maybe we're going to be paying in Canadian. So again, it's totally flexible to use with multi-currency as well for those companies that may be on multi-currency. So here, we've got a couple different options now. I'm going to click on my payables options, and I'm going to tell it when I run an EFT to use the EFT number. We could use a check number, but most companies like to indicate whether it's a check or an EFT. So we start off with EFTs, and I'm going to dive into this in a minute, which is the actual format that you can use. You can have multiple formats. So again, if we have different types of files, different types of banks, we can actually base that on a vendor. Maybe one vendor you want to pay out of one bank and another vendor you want to pay out of another. We can actually designate which file format to which bank by vendor, which is really nice. In this case, I've set it up pretty basic. This is our general business account format, and all of our checks, all of our EFTs are going, for all vendors, are going to go through this. Then I simply, again, I'm going to designate a file where our output is going to go. You can see here, foreign payments. They're probably structured differently. And again, we have a place here to indicate for foreign files. So we map those out. We can also do pre-notes. I'm not going to show you a pre-note today, but some of you are very familiar with a pre-note if you're doing any kind of direct deposit work, which is basically you ping $1 or 10 cents to your vendor's account to make sure that they've provided you with the correct banking information. Most banks, it's not mandatory. I definitely would recommend doing a pre-note when we start talking about the receivables end, so that you know when you go to collect your funds from your customers that they've given you the correct banking information, right? Vendors, not so much, but certainly a process that some companies like to do. We can even set it up if we want to require a pre-note, so your clerks can't just start running EFTs massively without going through the pre-note process. So for our purposes today, we're not going to worry about that. If we were, we could generate pre-notes here. It would go through and look at each vendor who has not actually had a pre-note run and generate that pre-note. So you can go through a process for that with maybe your new vendors once a week. You generate their pre-notes for them and get them all set up to do your payments. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK here. We're going to take a look at our receivables options. Again, I haven't marked this, but I would recommend for the receivables end that you're going to want to run prenotes and make sure you have the correct banking information when you go to collect your funds. And again, I have a slightly different format here. The receivables format is slightly different than the AP format. Really, it's just saying is it a credit file or a debit file. So I've gone ahead and I've mapped that here. And again, I've changed my format so I know this is an EFT receivable. And I'm going to say OK here. So we can go through all your banks and set this up. You can have multiple files. It's pretty much unlimited what you can do with this. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK here. So I know now that this bank is ready to run EFTs. One of the things we talked about is our file format. So I'm going to take you into this, to our EFT file format. Again, they're unlimited formats. This, again, is something that we would program for you to work with your bank. It ultimately creates a text file or an XML file. There's all different options. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull in this guy right here. And you can see I've worked with banks for a long time, so I know exactly what I'm looking at. Some of you might be, what does that mean? Really, it's a flat file, and it's giving us the number of characters for each field and whether we need to justify them, fill them. It's a whole format. The bank provides us with the format that they need. Most of them run, as you can see, off a standard US NACHA file, but each bank seems to have a little bit of a tweak. So there is, if I was to just go ahead and save this and start with a new one here, and I was to say purchasing, this is kind of how we start off with this. And we go into format, and again, look at all these different formats. We have Canadian formats. We have multiple US formats. We have user-defined. That's where we can get into doing some of these foreign files for specific banks. So I'm going to select here just our US NACHA CCD. A CCD plus is if you need to add an addenda record. Some banks are requiring that now, particularly if you're doing any type of health claim payments. So I'm going to click on my US NACHA CCD, and you see it's kind of pre-populated a lot of things for me. But we still need to, we can't just use it off the bat. Each bank seems a little bit different. Some have a settlement record, some don't. So we really need, the bank will provide us with their specific file format. Usually this is a good place to start though, because it is not just pretty standard. There's usually just a bit of tweaking that we need to do for each bank to get it going. So it's really as simple as that. We add our pad blocks. That's something that at Next Tech we're experts with because we've worked with a lot of banks. So it's pretty easy for us to put together these formats. Again, the same functionality, import and export from company to company, from bank to bank. So once you get one going, it's really easy to create multiple files from that. I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy here, and we'll go ahead and pull up. And you can see here, I have payables and receivables. The receivables file is slightly different than payable. And really that's all there is to that. And again, as you saw back in your bank, once these files are ready, we're going to associate the specific file to the bank that we want to use that file. So I'm going to go ahead now and show you on the vendor side what happens when we want to turn a vendor into somebody that receives an EFT. I'm going to pop up here, and we'll go ahead and pick our first vendor here. And it's driven off your remit to, which makes sense. It's where you would be paying. When I click now, there's a couple things to talk about. Here we have some email and configuration, and this is all out of box too. The beauty of all of this is when we can submit our file to our vendor, they are also going to get an email telling them what invoices we've paid, and they're going to know that to look for that payment. It's going to hit their bank. It's all done through email. No more stuffing envelopes. No more of that. It's right within GP. We set this up. So this is the email setup. I'm telling it you can send multiple attachments. I have it set up to run purchase orders too, but here's my vendor remittance. And it's telling it I want to send it in a PDF format as a vendor remittance. So that's one of our pieces here. Then I'm going to click on my remit to. If I go to my remit to, we can see it set up, but we've noticed here's a new button here. It's called EFT Bank. When I click on this, I see that my vendor is all set up. I've added their transit routing number, their bank account number, and again, I'm in the U.S., but we can see we've got countries all over the world where we can format and send these files. And we're going to indicate if it's a checking or a savings account. In some cases, if you've designated by vendor that you need to have specific file format type, we can indicate it here. Again, I've set it up so that every vendor is going to get the same file format through the same bank. So it's very flexible. We've got all these other fields, and most of these like SWIFT codes, that's really related to wires. So when we're doing those foreign setups, everything here is available, and I've not had one bank yet that I could not format a file for. So really it can happen all over. It will mark a pre-note if we're doing pre-notes once that pre-note is sent. But anyway, really, for the United States, it's just a few pieces of information that we really need to add here. And I'm going to say OK. And then if I go here to my email, I've set this up to go to me. But you would again put up here, this is where you're going to indicate who gets the email for your vendor remittance. Usually it's an AR clerk or somebody like that. So again, and we can CC and we can BCC. So we have a lot of options about who's actually going to get this remittance file. I'm going to close that and save. And that's all there is to setting up a vendor. So once everything's all set up, what happens? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to enter a couple transactions. I'm going to go to my payables. And the process is really very much the same. I'm going to create 3 invoices. And I'm going to say 1, 2. And just create simple invoices here. I think my distribution should all be set up. All right. We'll call this EFT1. I'm going to add my batch. I'm going to make sure it's my Uptown Trust checkbook that we want to pay from. And we'll go to my next vendor. In this case, we're going to pick good old Pilar Ackerman as employee, because you can also use this process for reimbursable expenses for your employees. So instead of them cutting the checks, we set them up as a vendor in GP, and all of a sudden, if you're not settling it through payroll, you can also settle it electronically through payables as well using the EFT process. So a lot of companies actually really like that and use that. Go ahead and put some money, and Pilar's getting $500 back. About 5,000. And we're going to go ahead and save this. And we're going to come here to our last vendor. And we're going to use Advanced Office. And we're going to pay them an invoice for $120. So again, you can see that our transaction entry process in GP is exactly the same. We know ultimately they're going to pay EFT, but it's not any different than what you're doing today. I'm going to go ahead and go to my batch and post my batch. Now what I've done here is, this is just to make my life a little bit easier when I'm running this. And you could do this as well. Once you run, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when I run it, but I've actually designated these vendors as a payment priority 1, and you'll see how that's going to work for me. When I come in here now, I'm ready. So it's check day, it's EFT day, your payables people are ready to run their process. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my standard select checks process. So it's nothing new. I'm going to come in and I'm going to say EFT1. I'm going to create my batch. You'll notice a little bit of difference here. I need to tell GP that I'm in fact creating an EFT. We have a choice of a check or an EFT. I'm going to create an EFT batch, and I'm going to select my checkbook that I want to process. And again, here's an option if it's a foreign or domestic file. In our case, it's going to be a domestic file. I'm going to save this. And what I'm going to do here is we have an opportunity to provide some filters here. And remember, class ID is one. Some companies label all their EFT vendors class ID. What I chose was I decided to pick the payment priority. Now, you really don't have to apply filters. So GP knows that when you select EFT as payment, it's only going to select those vendors that are set up for EFT to apply to process for payment. I'm only filtering it because it makes things quicker. So instead of going through all the vendors, it's only going to look at the payment priority ones so we can process this. But really, you don't have to filter it for a GP to know that it needs to pull the vendors that are set up for EFT. GP knows that. So I'm going to go ahead, though, and filter this and insert. And I'm going to go ahead and build my batch. And we can see here now it has created my check batch for those 3 vendors. And I'm just going to click like I normally would process. That looks right. Of course, we still have the same opportunity to go in and edit our check batch, to delete invoices. This is just like paying with checks, except at the end result, we're going to have a file instead of checks. So I'm going to go ahead and click process. And I have my check date, my posting date, click process here. And we're going to say OK. And that's analytical accounting. Now, here's something new. On my remittance form, I'm going to print my remittance. And I can select now to send this in an email. This is what is going to generate now to send my remittances to my vendor via email. One thing I do need to point out is that you do need to have Outlook either on the workstation, or it needs to be Outlook Exchange server, or some other MAPA compliant. It really likes Outlook, so it's Microsoft. They want you to stay connected. What I will say is, if you are not using Outlook for email, if I've seen people that are still actually using Lotus Notes, their email, there are third-party products that we can use to configure the email remittances to still go through email. So that's a little bit more money, but we're not talking, it's maybe $2,000 or $3,000. Most people are on Outlook, so you're going to out of the box have that. But if you don't use Outlook, we still can do this process for you. We just need to buy a little bit of an add-on piece to manage it for you. So in this case, I'm on Outlook. So I have an option. I can print it, and maybe we want to print one because we want to keep that in-house, and that's our, basically is our check step. And we can send it in email. So I'm going to go ahead and process this now. And when I log on, it's going to ask me for my logon information. If I remember that. I'm going to say OK. And here we go. And here's our screen. I'm going to select a standard. I'm going to say OK. And here's my exception report. So it's going to tell you if anything was not able to be processed successfully via email. I'm going to say OK. And here we go. And this is my voucher. Here's all my remittances these are the ones I'm going to print for in-house. You certainly don't have to. You could save these as a PDF electronically, however you want to manage them. Some companies do go like to print them, and they attach them with, as part of their check run, right, as their check stub. And so whoever needs to sign off on it can actually see what's processed. It's going to take a minute here because what it's doing right now, oh, look at that. I got my email showing that my remittances, I'm my vendor. Oh, here's Fabricam. Fabricam's paid me today. I'm going to be checking my bank. But this is telling me right here. We'll pop over to that in a minute. If I open this up. And we can put whatever wording you would like here in your email. It says, hello, attaches your remittance for my most recent check run. Please do your accuracy. Please contact us. We can set this up to say whatever you like. If I click on this, what do you know? Here's my formatted check remittance. And you can see that these are coming through. So I had 3 payments. I put them all to me for 3 different vendors. So your vendor's going to get this immediately. I just think this is great. It saves so much time and it saves so much cost. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. We can see the remittances come through. I'll go ahead and close this now. And here's our report. This would document, it's telling us all of my remittances were sent successfully. If it will tell you if they're not, because once in a while maybe an email address is wrong, it's not able to process it. This report is going to tell you, so you can stop and figure out, get everything corrected and then just process it again. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And now everything went through successfully, so now I'm going to go ahead and post my file. and I'm going to head and close this. Now we have one last step. We're going to generate our EFT file. And again, because of GP security, all of this can be secured. So maybe you don't want your AP clerk who just ran this process to generate the EFT file. Maybe you want to have somebody else, so we can certainly secure that so the person who's actually processing the payments is not generating the EFT file. The folder that it goes out to can also be locked down, so only certain people can open that folder. Typically, it's very secure at the bank. Most banks have dual sign, so somebody might generate the EFT file, somebody else might upload it, and then a third person might go up and actually sign off on it. So you have all the controls you need. Actually, EFTs are far safer this day and age than checks are. You can put whatever kind of controls around that. We can help you work through the most appropriate for your company. So now if I'm gonna go ahead and generate, and I know that this is a purchasing file. I'm gonna pick my bank, and voila, here we are. Here's my three payments that I just generated. I'm going to select this. I'm going to select my transmission date and my settlement date. So if I have a different date, you may transmit it today, but it won't actually settle to the vendor till the next day. That's up to you to drive that. I'm going to go ahead and click Generate. And here we go. Here it says my file has been generated. Now if I pop over here to my documents, I can see here, let's put this up, that we have just generated a payment today at 10:37 a.m. Here is my file. If I open my file up, I can see all the slick formatting that we've done. That was that whole setup window. It's created a file that is exactly what the bank needs to see. So again, very similar process to the Safe Pay. We can manually upload this, or a lot of banks have an FTP process where this can be a secure folder. The only thing that can go in and grab it is your FTP program, and you can just run it and schedule it to run every night. It'll take everything, and all of a sudden everything has become automated. So again, that's really your choice, and we work with all different banks, and all of them usually have different options on how you can actually handle transmitting that file. Once the file is up, then almost every bank I've ever worked with also then has the option. Somebody will need to go up and approve it. So usually we have our summary report. We go to our approver. They make sure that the total matches, and we approve it. So there's lots of really nice security around this. So once this is done, that's it. We're paid. If we go in here and we take a peek at our vendor, let's just go here to ACE, and I'm going to go ahead and redisplay, and I see now, here's all my EFTs that I paid. They show up. So really, the process is very much like writing a check, except without all the costs. But really, it's not going to be a lot different for your payables people to get up to speed with that. So really quick now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here. We can do the same process for sales for your customers. So if we come in here, and again, the invoices are already there. Let's say I want to go ahead and I've gotten some checks in, or I want to go ahead, I've got some cash receipts here, or I'm going to create some cash receipts. So what this would mean is you have an agreement with your customer that you're allowed to sweep their account, basically. So instead of them paying you by a check, they authorize you. You're a trusted vendor. They authorize you to go in and to sweep their account. They maybe will notify you, please pay this, this invoice, that invoice, whatnot. So now I can go in. Maybe I've got my authorization. I'm going to go ahead and set up my cash receipt and select my customer here, and we're going to say that it's a check, but it's an EFT that we're going to generate here. Okay, for $50, and I can go ahead and apply it. And so, okay, so again, this is just, other than selecting an EFT, this is like entering any cash receipt. And we'll come here, and we're going to again mark EFT. And we'll go ahead and apply this. And we'll go ahead and apply it to this invoice. And our last one here, we are going to go in and again marking EFT. And we're going to go ahead and apply this and say okay. We're going to save, and I'm going to go up here and post my batch. Okay, so just like our normal process, except now I have another step. And I'm going to come here, and I'm going to generate an EFT file again. So here it is, boom, that we just entered. I'm going to select it. I'm going to generate. Very similar to the other process that we just did for payables, except this time you're getting the money. Instead of paying out, it's going to go into these customers, and it's going to sweep their funds, and you should see it showing up the next day in your bank account. So again, not every customer is going to want to do that, but for those that are willing, it saves everybody money. So again, that's some really nice functionality we have. So I think that the only other thing I was going to talk about, and again, I don't have a file from the bank because they're file specific, but the last feature of the electronic banking is the electronic reconcile module, where it will go through the GP, the bank reconciliation. It's a file you'll download from the bank, and it can clear your checks for you. It can mark your deposits clear. Basically, it does matching for you, which really speeds up your bank rec process. That's available to implement as well. So in the interest of not running out of time here, Allison is going to go ahead and open this up for any questions.